Asterisk. Get the feck up. You're still lying there? Good. Stay there if you want a weak life. But if something inside you is screaming, then listen. Nobody's coming to save you. No miracle, no shortcut. No excuse that will fix your situation. You either move or you stay stuck forever. Pain is part of the process. Discipline is the weapon. Get up, even when you don't feel like it. Especially then. Because winners act, losers wait. So get the fuck up and prove you're not done. Taking responsibility for everything means you stop pointing fingers at the world and start looking directly at yourself. It means you understand that your current situation, no matter how unfair it feels, is something you have the power to change. Blaming your past, your environment, or other people might feel comfortable, but it keeps you weak and stuck. The moment you accept full responsibility is the moment you take control back. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming the architect of your own life. Most people avoid responsibility because it's heavy. It forces you to confront your failures, your bad decisions, and your lack of effort. It's easier to say the system is broken, the opportunities weren't there, or someone else held you back. But those excuses don't build anything. They don't make you stronger, richer, smarter, or more capable. They just keep you in the same place, repeating the same patterns, living the same average life. Responsibility, on the other hand, is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. It puts the burden on you, and that's exactly why it works. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting. You don't wait for the perfect moment, the right support, or external validation. You act with what you have, where you are. If you're out of shape, it's on you to train. If you're broke, it's on you to learn and earn. If your mindset is weak, it's on you to fix it. This way of thinking removes all excuses, because there's always something you can do. Even small actions, taken consistently, start to shift your reality. Responsibility turns complaints into action and frustration into fuel. It also sharpens your awareness. You begin to analyze your decisions more honestly. Instead of saying, "That didn't work," you ask, "What did I do wrong and how can I improve?" You start identifying patterns in your behavior that are holding you back. Maybe you procrastinate. Maybe you quit too early. Maybe you fear failure. Once you own those flaws, you can work on them. Ignoring them only guarantees they'll control you forever. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for things completely outside your control. It means focusing on your response to those situations. Life will throw unfair challenges at you, setbacks you didn't ask for, and obstacles you didn't deserve. But how you react is always within your control. You can choose to break or to adapt. Responsibility is choosing to adapt every time. No matter how difficult it gets, it also builds resilience. When you know everything depends on you, you stop folding under pressure. You learn to handle stress, uncertainty, and failure with a stronger mindset. You understand that setbacks are part of the process, not a signal to quit. Every failure becomes a lesson instead of a defeat. You become harder to break because you're no longer relying on external factors to carry you forward. People who take responsibility earn respect, even from themselves. There's a different level of confidence that comes from knowing you're in control of your direction. You don't need approval because you trust your own ability to figure things out. You become dependable, disciplined, and consistent. Others notice it, but more importantly, you feel it internally. This mindset forces growth. You can't stay the same if you're constantly holding yourself accountable. You're always looking for ways to improve, to do better, to move faster and smarter. It creates momentum because you're not stuck in excuses anymore. Every day becomes an opportunity to take another step forward, no matter how small. Responsibility is the dividing line between people who stay average and people who rise above it. Average people explain why things didn't work. Strong people find a way to make things work. When you fully accept that everything in your life is your responsibility, you unlock a level of control and power that most people never experience. Stopping excuses means cutting off the lies you tell yourself to stay comfortable. Every excuse sounds reasonable in your head, but in reality, it's just a shield protecting you from effort, risk, and discomfort. You say you're too tired, too busy, not ready, not lucky enough, not talented enough. All of it feels valid in the moment, but none of it moves your life forward. Excuses are the easiest way to justify doing nothing while convincing yourself it's acceptable. The truth is, excuses are a habit. The more you use them, the more automatic they become. Your brain starts looking for reasons to avoid action instead of finding ways to push through. You begin to normalize inaction. Days pass, then weeks, then years, and you're still in the same place, telling yourself the same stories. It's not that you can't improve your situation. It's that you've trained yourself not to try hard enough. Most excuses are built around fear. Fear of failing, fear of looking stupid, fear of not being good enough. Instead of facing that fear directly, you disguise it as logic. You tell yourself the timing isn't right or the conditions aren't perfect. But conditions are never perfect. There will always be obstacles, distractions, and reasons to wait. If you keep waiting for everything to line up, you'll never start. Another layer of excuses comes from comparison. You look at people who are ahead of you and convince yourself they had advantages you didn't. Maybe they did. But focusing on that does nothing for you. It doesn't close the gap. It doesn't improve your skills. It doesn't increase your effort. It just gives you a comfortable narrative that explains why you're behind without requiring you to change anything. Stopping excuses requires brutal honesty. You have to catch yourself in the moment and question what you're saying. When you hear yourself making a reason not to act, pause and ask if it's truly a limitation or just resistance. Most of the time, it's resistance. It's your mind trying to keep you in a safe, familiar place. Growth doesn't happen there. Action is the antidote. The moment you replace an excuse with a step forward, you break the pattern. You don't need massive progress instantly. You need movement. If you're tired, do something small. If you're unsure, learn something. If you're afraid, act anyway. Every time you move instead of making an excuse, you weaken that habit and strengthen discipline. It also means accepting discomfort as normal. When something feels hard, your first instinct is to avoid it. That's where excuses come in. But difficulty is not a signal to stop. It's a sign that you're doing something that matters. The more you accept that, the less power excuses have over you. You stop interpreting discomfort as a problem and start seeing it as part of the process. Environment plays a role too. If you're surrounded by people who constantly justify laziness or negativity, it becomes easier for you to do the same. Excuses spread in groups. People validate each other's inaction, so no one feels accountable. If you want to eliminate excuses, you need to be aware of that influence and distance yourself from it when necessary. When you remove excuses, your results become clearer. You see exactly where you stand based on your actions, not your intentions. That clarity can be uncomfortable because there's nothing to hide behind. But it's also powerful because it gives you a real starting point. You know what needs to improve, and you know it's up to you to improve it. There's no benefit to holding on to excuses. They don't protect you, they limit you. They don't make things easier, they delay progress. The moment you stop using them, you remove the barriers you've been placing in your own path. What's left is effort, consistency, and accountability. And that's where real change begins. Choosing discipline over motivation means you stop relying on how you feel and start relying on what you've decided. Motivation is unpredictable. Some days it's there, pushing you forward, making everything feel easier. Other days it disappears completely, leaving you stuck, distracted, or unwilling to act. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. Discipline removes that instability. It creates a system where action happens regardless of mood, energy, or external circumstances. Motivation is emotional. It comes from excitement, inspiration, or temporary desire. The problem is that emotions change constantly. What excites you today might not excite you tomorrow. If you only act when you feel motivated, you train yourself to avoid effort whenever things feel difficult. Discipline is different. It's built on commitment. It doesn't ask whether you feel like doing something, it expects you to do it anyway. That expectation is what creates consistency, and consistency is what produces results. Most people misunderstand discipline as something harsh or restrictive. In reality, it's a form of control and freedom at the same time. When you're disciplined, you don't waste time negotiating with yourself. You don't sit there debating whether you should start, whether it's worth it, or whether you're in the mood. The decision has already been made. That clarity saves mental energy and removes hesitation. You move faster because you're not constantly second-guessing your actions. Discipline also builds trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on something you said you would do, you reinforce the idea that your word matters. That internal trust is powerful. It changes how you see yourself. You're no longer someone who talks about goals. You're someone who executes them. On the other hand, when you rely on motivation and repeatedly fall short, you start doubting your own reliability. That doubt spreads into every area of your life. There's a strong connection between discipline and identity. The actions you repeat daily shape who you become. If you consistently act with discipline, even when it's uncomfortable, you start identifying as someone who does what needs to be done. That identity makes future actions easier because it becomes part of who you are, not just something you try to do occasionally. Motivation can't build that identity because it doesn't show up often enough. Discipline is especially important when things go wrong. When you face setbacks, failures, or slow progress, motivation drops quickly. It's hard to feel inspired when results aren't immediate. That's where most people quit. Discipline keeps you moving during those periods. It allows you to continue putting in effort even when you're not seeing rewards yet. Over time, those consistent actions compound, and that's when results start to appear. Building discipline isn't about sudden drastic changes. It's about small, repeated actions that become non-negotiable. You set standards for yourself and stick to them. It could be waking up at a certain time, completing a task daily, or following through on commitments no matter what. The key is consistency. The more you repeat disciplined behavior, the stronger it becomes, and the less you depend on motivation. Another advantage of discipline is that it reduces emotional decision-making. When you operate based on feelings, your decisions fluctuate. One day you push hard, the next day you do nothing. Discipline stabilizes that pattern. It creates a baseline of effort that doesn't change with your mood. That stability is what allows long-term progress, because progress requires sustained effort over time, not bursts of intensity followed by inactivity. Discipline also prepares you for pressure. In difficult situations, you don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your habits. If your habits are built on discipline, you'll respond more effectively when things get tough. You won't need to think too much about what to do, because your actions are already structured. That automatic response can make the difference between moving forward and falling behind. Relying on motivation feels easier in the short term because it allows you to act only when it's convenient. But that convenience comes at a cost. It limits your growth and keeps your results inconsistent. Discipline requires effort up front, but it pays off by creating reliability and momentum. Once that momentum builds, tasks that once felt difficult become routine. Over time, discipline can even create its own form of motivation. When you see progress, no matter how small, it reinforces your actions. You start feeling a sense of achievement and control, which can boost your drive. But the difference is that now motivation becomes a byproduct of discipline, not the source of it. You're no longer dependent on it to act. It simply supports what you're already doing. Choosing discipline over motivation is about accepting that progress isn't supposed to feel easy every day. It's about understanding that consistency matters more than intensity, and that showing up repeatedly will always outperform waiting for the perfect moment. When you operate with discipline, you remove the uncertainty from your actions and replace it with structure. And that structure is what turns effort into real, measurable results. Embracing pain and struggle means you stop seeing discomfort as something to avoid and start recognizing it as part of growth. Most people run from anything that feels hard. The moment something becomes uncomfortable, they look for an exit, a distraction, or an excuse to quit. That instinct keeps them stuck. Pain is not the enemy. It's the signal that you're pushing beyond your current limits. Without it, nothing changes. Struggle forces adaptation. When things are easy, you don't improve. You just repeat what you already know. It's only when you're challenged, when you're tested, that you're forced to think differently, act differently, and become stronger. Every difficult situation carries a lesson, but you only get that lesson if you face it instead of avoiding it. Running away from struggle might protect your comfort in the short term, but it guarantees stagnation in the long term. There are different types of pain, and understanding that matters. There's the pain of discipline, and there's the pain of regret. One is temporary and leads to growth. The other lingers and holds you back. When you avoid effort, you trade short-term comfort for long-term dissatisfaction. You know you could have done more, been more, achieved more. That feeling doesn't disappear. On the other hand, when you choose to push through difficulty, the pain fades, but the progress stays. Embracing struggle also builds resilience. Life is unpredictable. Things will go wrong. Plans will fail. And obstacles will appear without warning. If you've trained yourself to avoid hardship, those moments will break you. But if you're used to dealing with difficulty, you handle it differently. You stay calm, you adapt, and you keep moving. Resilience isn't something you develop by staying comfortable. It's built through repeated exposure to challenges. Your mindset determines how you experience pain. If you see it as punishment, you'll resist it. If you see it as a tool, you'll use it. That shift changes everything. The same challenge that stops someone else becomes an opportunity for you to grow. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can I gain from this?" That perspective turns obstacles into stepping stones instead of barriers. There's also a level of honesty that comes with embracing struggle. You stop pretending things are easier than they are. You accept that meaningful progress requires effort, sacrifice, and persistence. You don't expect instant results or smooth paths. That realism keeps you grounded and focused. You're less likely to quit because you're not surprised by difficulty, you're prepared for it. Another important aspect is endurance. Not all struggles are short. Some take time, sometimes a long time. Staying committed during those periods is what separates people who succeed from those who give up. It's easy to push for a day or a week, but maintaining effort over months or years requires a different level of mindset. Embracing struggle means you're willing to stay in the process, even when progress feels slow. Pain also sharpens your focus. When something is difficult, it demands your attention. You can't approach it lazily or half-heartedly. You're forced to be present, to think, to adjust. That level of engagement leads to deeper learning and better results. Easy situations don't require that level of focus, which is why they don't produce the same growth. There's a sense of pride that comes from overcoming struggle. Not external validation, but internal recognition that you pushed through something difficult. That builds confidence in a real way. You know you can handle challenges because you've done it before. That confidence isn't based on words or intentions, it's based on experience. Avoiding pain might feel like the safer choice, but it limits your potential. It keeps you operating at a level that doesn't demand much from you. Embracing pain, on the other hand, expands your capacity. It shows you what you're capable of when you don't quit. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes manageable, and new challenges take its place. Struggle is not something to fear, it's something to use. It shapes your mindset, strengthens your character, and pushes you forward. The more you accept it, the less power it has over you. Instead of being something that stops you, it becomes something that drives you to improve and keep moving ahead. Acting immediately means you stop giving yourself time to talk yourself out of things. Hesitation is where doubt grows. The longer you wait, the more your mind fills with reasons, fears, and distractions. What felt simple at first suddenly feels complicated. You start overthinking, analyzing every possible outcome, and most of the time, you end up doing nothing. Action kills that cycle before it even starts. Speed matters because it builds momentum. When you move quickly on decisions, you stay in control of your direction. You don't sit around waiting for perfect clarity or ideal conditions. You accept that you'll figure things out as you go. That mindset keeps you progressing while others are still stuck thinking. Momentum compounds. One action leads to another, and before you know it, you've covered ground that hesitation would have stolen from you. Hesitation often comes from fear disguised as logic. You tell yourself you need more time, more information, more preparation. Sometimes that's true, but most of the time it's just resistance. It's your brain trying to protect you from uncertainty. Acting immediately doesn't mean being reckless. It means recognizing when delay is unnecessary and choosing to move anyway. You trust your ability to adapt instead of waiting for guarantees that don't exist. There's also a connection between action and confidence. Confidence isn't something you wait to feel before you act. It's something you build by acting. Every time you take initiative, even if the outcome isn't perfect, you reinforce the idea that you can handle situations. Waiting for confidence before moving is backwards. The movement itself creates it. Overthinking is one of the biggest obstacles to progress. When you analyze too much, you start focusing on potential problems instead of solutions. You imagine worst-case scenarios and convince yourself they're likely. Acting quickly cuts through that noise. It forces you to deal with reality instead of hypothetical situations. Most of the fears you build in your head never actually happen, but they still stop you if you let them. Acting immediately also improves your ability to make decisions. Like any skill, decision-making gets better with practice. If you constantly delay, you never develop that skill. You stay unsure, second-guessing yourself. When you act more often, you learn from real outcomes. You see what works and what doesn't. That feedback sharpens your judgment over time. There's a difference between planning and delaying. Planning has a purpose. It prepares you to act effectively. Delaying is avoidance disguised as preparation. You keep telling yourself you're getting ready, but you're not actually moving forward. Acting immediately forces you to separate the two. If you truly need preparation, you do it with urgency. If not, you move straight into action. Opportunities are often time-sensitive. When you hesitate, you risk missing them entirely. Someone else steps in, takes the chance, and moves ahead while you're still deciding. Acting quickly puts you in positions that hesitation never will. Even if the outcome isn't perfect, you gain experience and exposure that you wouldn't have otherwise. Another benefit is energy. When you act right away, you use the energy you already have. When you delay, that energy fades. What felt like a good idea loses its intensity. You become less interested, less driven, and eventually you drop it completely. Acting immediately captures that initial drive and turns it into something real. Mistakes are part of the process, and acting quickly means you'll make some. But those mistakes are valuable because they teach you faster. If you wait too long trying to avoid errors, you slow down your learning. Progress comes from doing, adjusting, and improving, not from trying to be perfect before you start. Acting without hesitation creates a habit of execution. You become someone who moves, not someone who thinks about moving. That identity changes how you approach everything. Tasks don't pile up because you handle them early. Decisions don't drain you because you make them quickly. You operate with a sense of urgency that keeps you ahead. Waiting feels safe, but it costs you time, growth, and opportunity. Acting immediately removes that cost. It pushes you into motion, and motion is where everything happens. Building mental toughness means training your mind to stay steady under pressure instead of collapsing when things get difficult. It's not something you're born with. It's something you develop through repeated exposure to challenges, setbacks, and discomfort. Most people avoid situations that test them, which keeps their mindset fragile. The moment things go wrong, they lose focus, confidence, and direction. Mental toughness is the opposite of that. It's the ability to stay controlled, focused, and committed even when everything feels difficult. It starts with how you respond to discomfort. When something feels hard, your instinct is to pull back. Mental toughness is built by doing the opposite. You lean into that discomfort instead of avoiding it. You push yourself to continue when your mind is telling you to stop. Over time, that repeated behavior changes your threshold. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. You don't eliminate difficulty. You increase your capacity to handle it. Control over your thoughts is a major part of this. Your mind will constantly produce negative ideas when you're under pressure. Doubt, fear, and frustration show up automatically. Mental toughness isn't about never having those thoughts. It's about not letting them control your actions. You learn to observe them without reacting. Instead of believing every negative thought, you question it and keep moving forward anyway. Consistency plays a big role. Doing something once, when you feel strong, doesn't build toughness. Repeating disciplined actions when you feel weak does. It's easy to stay focused on a good day. It's much harder when you're tired, stressed, or unmotivated. Those are the moments that matter most. Every time you show up in those conditions, you reinforce resilience. You prove to yourself that your actions aren't dependent on your mood. Failure is another key element. If you avoid failure, you avoid growth. Mental toughness comes from experiencing setbacks and continuing despite them. When something doesn't work, you don't collapse or quit. You analyze what happened, adjust, and try again. That process builds confidence because you realize failure isn't the end, it's part of progress. The more you go through it, the less it affects you. There's also a level of emotional control involved. Strong emotions can disrupt your focus if you let them. Anger, frustration, or stress can lead to poor decisions. Mental toughness means staying composed in those moments. You don't ignore your emotions, but you don't let them dictate your behavior. You maintain clarity and act based on what needs to be done, not how you feel in the moment. Discipline supports mental toughness. When you have structured habits, you don't rely on willpower alone. Your routine carries you through difficult periods. You don't have to decide whether to act. You just follow what you've already committed to. That structure reduces the impact of mental resistance because the decision has already been made. Another important aspect is patience. Not everything improves quickly. Some challenges take time, and progress can feel slow. Mental toughness allows you to stay committed, even when results aren't immediate. You don't lose focus just because you're not seeing instant rewards. You understand that consistency over time is what creates real change. Environment can influence your mindset as well. Being around people who give up easily or complain constantly can weaken your own mental strength. You start adopting the same patterns. On the other hand, surrounding yourself with people who push through challenges can reinforce toughness. You see what's possible and adjust your own standards accordingly. Physical challenges can also strengthen your mind. Pushing your body through difficult tasks trains your brain to handle stress. When you learn to keep going physically despite fatigue, that same mindset transfers to other areas of your life. It's not just about fitness, it's about building a connection between effort and endurance. Mental toughness is about reliability. It's knowing that no matter what happens, you won't fold under pressure. You might struggle. You might feel the weight of the situation, but you keep moving. That reliability creates confidence because you trust yourself to handle challenges.